All right, welcome everyone to this week's episode of Confidently in Charge. I am your hostess, Allison Kravietz-Thayer, the founder of Poppy Lead, which works with new entrepreneurs on the personal leadership development side of starting a business. And I love using this platform of the Confidently in Charge container to have conversations with other entrepreneurs about how it's going, how they got to where they're at, because we're really all leaders. Sometimes we don't like to claim that title for ourselves, but I love kind of driving home the point that we're all leaders, and we can all be confidently in charge. So I'm so glad today to have my wonderful friend Lana Kitcher here with us. Lana is a productivity strategist, and she works with entrepreneurs to really get organized. I know that has been a struggle for me. Sometimes I tend to be a big visionary with all sorts of ideas and post-it notes and whiteboards. And sometimes the task of getting organized and knowing how to move forward and having some clarity around that is just so important. We originally met through Kelly Hoag's community, the Morning Magic Collective. And funny enough, Kelly was actually our last guest on the show. So I just really love these communities that I'm a part of. But Lana and I met and have engaged with each other here and there, and just have always kind of been in similar circles and have worked together. And she has a very cool membership community, kind of mastermind container that she's putting out to the world. So just all sorts of cool stuff going on. But I am so excited to welcome you, Lana.
Thank you so much, Allison, for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be here talking with you and just continuing our collaboration in all the different areas that you already mentioned.
Yeah, love it. So awesome. The first question I always love to ask people, because you are the entrepreneur at the top of LK Consultants. And so, did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like, is that how you answered when you were a little kid?
That's really funny. I didn't really know that was a thing when I was a little kid. However, if you look back at all of the different things that I did and people that I worked for, maybe at the time it's just that my family didn't know that much about entrepreneurship, or I didn't know that much about it. I didn't have that much influence. But looking back at little me and teenage me, I definitely can see the through line for how I am where I am and all of the different pieces that brought me here. I had my first job basically when I was 8. I worked as a mommy's helper, I guess is what they called it. So I wasn't a babysitter alone with the kid, but I was there helping the mother, and she was an entrepreneur. And then sort of together with helping with the child, I was also helping her with some of her business things like filing or answering the phone. And so that was kind of where I think I could point to where it got started. But even before that, my favorite game as a kid was what I called playing desk. And I even asked my mother later, like, if you had to say what I would be as an 8-year-old growing up, what would you say? And she said, oh yeah, remember all those times you played desk, like organizing your desk and moving things around your desk? And that was
Oh
before
my gosh.
computers were mainstream in everybody's home. So first I just started with paperwork that I would like find in the bin at school, and I'd
Oh
pretend to
my
use that.
gosh.
So looking backwards, I think, yes, like I could have pointed to becoming an entrepreneur, but looking forwards, there were a lot of other steps along the way that I had to
Oh my
explore and
gosh.
experience.
I love that so much. That's really precious. Playing desk, I can see that. I used to ask my mom for homework, like even as a little kid, because I would see my brother do homework, and I was like, I want to do homework. And so she would like, write like C-A or like C space T and like draw a cat. And I would like have to write the letter in and all of that and like do a little stuff. So I love that. What a beautiful testament to kind of the direction that you've gone. Now you like literally organize desks. That
Yeah.
is part of what you do. That's so cool that it kind of started there for you.
Exactly.
Um, so those early days of entrepreneurship, when you're figuring out like, okay, I've seen this happen before. I love kind of being in this businessy space. How were those early days of entrepreneurship for you?
So I'd say that there were different periods of entrepreneurship in my life. The first period was when I was a kid. I would do the helping with other entrepreneurs. I then, when I was old enough, I would babysit, and that in and of itself is sort of like running your own business. You have multiple
Mhm,
clients. You have to figure out how much to charge, how to follow up, like all of those
mhm,
things. As a kid, I didn't see it that way, but now looking backwards, I
mhm.
do.
Like,
So
hey,
the
gaining some skills.
Exactly. I would make things, I'd make bumper stickers and I would sell them. I would find things in my house and I would sell them at tag sale. So like I think that it was
Wow.
definitely there.
Yeah.
Then the next phase, I started working for other people who were all entrepreneurs, so local business owners, local
Mm,
shops, things like that. In college, I had a number of different jobs just to sort of make some income on the side.
mhm,
Then sort of fast forward again. There was a recession after I graduated from college, and I wasn't able to find a full-time job in the area that I was looking for. And
mhm.
I proposed to two different entrepreneurs what I could do for their businesses.
Mm,
That basically, again, sort of accidentally created my own business in doing this. I
wow.
had to go to full time for health insurance for a couple of years, but
Mhm,
basically, that full time, it did give me a lot of experience and a lot of friendships, and I'm glad that
mhm,
I did it. But while I was there, I realized, hey, I don't think that I'm built or wired to work at a full time position in this
mhm,
way. And when health insurance was no longer an issue,
mhm.
that's when I officially left the full time world, the
Wow.
corporate world, and then started what I'm doing now. So I've been doing things basically my whole life, but for about 3.5 years is when I officially full time said, okay, I work for myself, and here's how we're
Mhm.
going to make it work.
Awesome. Wow. So you kind of like your stepping stones along the way have been in alignment and kind of leading you to where you are now. So, it sounds like did you always know it was productivity and like what you're doing now, or did that kind of shift a little as well?
I really had to discover um, through all of these different experiences what I was meant to do.
Mhm.
And again, looking backwards, it's like, oh God, it was so obvious. Come on, Lana, wake up and see it. But moving forwards, I thought, I was very interested, as you can see behind me, I was interested in Japan. I spent a lot of years learning Japanese. I lived in Japan for a couple of years, and that led me. So when I was a kid, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had a couple of ideas. I didn't know about, what I do now. I didn't know that was a thing. So it
Mhm.
wasn't as easy for me to just say, yes, I want to do that and then work towards that. I wanted at some point to be a veterinarian, and I had a lot of
Mhm.
ideas.
Mhm.
When I went to college, I went into a liberal arts school undeclared because I was still very confused. I liked music, I liked theater, like sort of a jack of all trades.
Mhm.
Um, and I went in not knowing, but as I went through the experience, I realized I had all of these East Asian courses on my plate, and I
Mhm.
was planning to study abroad in Japan for a year. So I said, okay, let me just make that my major.
Mhm.
And then, having studied abroad in Japan and moving to Japan again, I said, okay, well, maybe I can make a career out of cross cultural consulting. Like, that's really interesting here. I'm very passionate about this.
Mhm.
And when I came back from Japan, that's the area I was looking for work in. However, I wasn't able to find a full time position,
Mhm.
and so the two female entrepreneurs that I had sent those proposals to, both of them were cross cultural consultants. So I said, "Hey, I will learn about cross cultural consulting while doing this other thing for you. I'm going to help you manage the back end. I'm going to help you with business development. I'm going to help you get your website in order, and all these things that I already
Mhm.
knew how to do and knew I was good at."
Mhm.
And so I worked for both of them for a year. And I basically decided, hey, actually, I don't think cross cultural consulting is the way I want to go. I really enjoyed this thing that I was doing for you entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
When I found a full time position, it was also in business development at a larger corporation. So that continued sort of the through line, but I was just getting more skills in that area.
Mhm.
Leaving that full time position, I thought I wanted to go into branding slash marketing. I tried
Mhm.
that for a little while. It didn't quite fit for a number of reasons. And then I switched to project management, and I
Mhm.
tried that for a little while. And again, it just didn't quite fit for a number of reasons.
Mhm.
And as I was just doing more research, finding out about the field of professional organizing, which I didn't really know that much about before,
Mhm.
being introduced to different people who are doing different things, being introduced to the coaching world, things just kind of
Mhm.
started clicking together. And I was seeing how through all of these different jobs, through the helping the two consultants, before that helping a self-made millionaire, before that helping all of these business owners, there
Mhm.
was a through line that I appreciated helping them getting organized, getting productive, turning
Mhm.
huge mountain-sized projects into small manageable tasks, and
Mhm.
empowering them to be able to accomplish their goals. Like through and through, everything was about me helping these entrepreneurs get to where they wanted to go. So I still think I'm honing in on how best to do that. And every year my services change just a little bit, so that I can take what I think that I do best and where I find the most joy and help the entrepreneurs. But it does continuously come back to helping entrepreneurs, and very specifically, although not intentionally, women and minority owned businesses, and
Mhm.
then really just like being a cheerleader for them in a way that they're missing. Maybe they don't have a business partner, maybe they don't have employees. I tend to work with people between years 1 and 5, so they don't yet have employees.
Mhm.
And I just keep coming back to this. So I do think I'm on the right track. I suspect
Yeah.
it will continue to shift as I continue to figure it out. But that's kind of how I got here.
Wow. So what I really hear through that is kind of this like willingness to pay attention to like what stood out for you and to kind of see like, okay, what keeps rising to the top here, and like acknowledging like, okay, these are the things that bring me joy, these are the areas that I really want to like lean into, these are the things I'm naturally good at. So very cool to kind of see those, and like it sounds like you really kind of continued following that path, which is really cool. I wanted to ask, like, you recently shared part of your journey online, talking about sort of shifting from this idea of like striving for work life balance, which I imagine, being an entrepreneur who works with a lot of entrepreneurs, sometimes work life balance gets a little fuzzy because, we are our companies and that kind of thing. But you've kind of shifted away from striving for work life balance to really just focusing on being in alignment. So I'm curious about kind of what that journey looks like for you, and how is that even like impacting your business or expanding in your life.
Yeah, that's a really big topic. And I think,
Mhm.
so Kelly Hogue, who you mentioned and whose episode came out today,
Mhm.
really played an instrumental part in that. I joined her group, and that's a big thing that she teaches is about alignment. And I think a lot of people in her group are also in California, which I'm from New York. And I think that the terminology used in different states, can be very different. And so I just kept hearing this over and over again, where in the past, I think, and especially being in productivity and entrepreneurship, work-life balance is a thing that people talk about a lot, but I don't think that it's very realistic. And I think that the world is kind of starting to figure that out. It isn't just, hey, 50% of my day is work, and then the other
Mhm.
50% of my day is play.
Mhm.
Another thing that came into and that I heard about recently is called plurk, which is play work. And this
Ooh.
ties into alignment in that if your work is just dreadful and you have to slug your way through every day and you're like walking through thick mud, it's too much.
Mhm.
It's too much of your life to have to work that way. And so I think I had, this has been a very interesting year, a very challenging year for many.
Mhm.
And I was realizing a lot of my challenges in, this area, in the alignment area, I think tie back to my money story, which I'm still discovering and kind of pulling apart, figuring out. But especially this year, I was afraid of not having enough income. And so I was taking on projects that were closer to what I was doing before, as far as project management. And then at one point, a couple of months ago, I just looked at my to-do list, I looked at my calendar, I looked at all the projects I was working on, and I just felt so much friction. And I was trying to figure out where this friction was coming from. I'm working for myself. I love working for myself. Why do I feel this way?
Mhm.
And it was that on the surface, although the projects could technically be kind of bucketed into what I do, I really had gotten kind of far away from what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing, and just got to this is what people needed. And I said yes, even though it wasn't really a great fit. So I'm trying to get myself back from this side over to this side. And this side is where I feel more aligned. And when you're feeling aligned, the friction goes away. It doesn't feel like work anymore. It feels like plurk. You're playing at work and you don't necessarily have to worry about the work-life balance because you enjoy the work.
Mhm.
And you do have to think about, I want to work and I really like what I'm doing, but I also want to spend time with my spouse and my dog and my family. So you do still have to make time for those things. And I say make time rather than find time.
Mhm.
Um, but I think now it's more about this alignment feeling, not so much about this balance feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes so much sense, and especially kind of given your past and your like path to this place, and like continuing to follow what feels good and continuing to kind of, like, it's language is such a wild thing sometimes. I was just talking to a client about it earlier, how like there are certain words that just like don't quite capture what we want, and I feel like work life balance was just a common phrase that was like everybody talked about it, and so that's what we thought we all had to strive for. And so yeah, just having that new language of like, okay, but what really matters to me is being in alignment, because it's not fun work if I'm working 8 hours a day and I hate every minute, like,
Right.
ugh. But I want to talk about that experience of entrepreneurship, and like, you mentioned like previously working for entrepreneurs and now kind of working for yourself. um and I just want to ask, like, how is that? Like, we don't always have teams around us to support us and like cheer us on. Like, how do you maintain that support and like willingness to keep going through kind of challenges?
Exactly. I am the demographic that I help. I am years 1 to 5 in my full-time business. Although, sure, I've been doing this type of thing for a long time. It is a different experience being maybe the only one in your family who's an entrepreneur, or the only one in your household who's an entrepreneur. And you might have supportive friends or supportive partners, supportive family, but they're still not in it with you. They're just sort of right on the periphery, and you can talk about it, but they can't feel what you're feeling. So in a need for myself, I first started a Facebook group that combined a number of different friends that I knew from different areas who were all kind of working from home. So at the time, it wasn't necessarily specific to them running their own businesses, but being home alone for the majority of the day is very isolating. So I brought together this group and we kind of just chatted throughout the day or asked each other's questions, asked for support in looking through things that we might have created. And then that kind of disbanded, and that a number of the people, their situations changed, or just wasn't necessarily a long-term fit for the time. But I took my experience from that and I created a new group called Bird by Bird, and I kind of honed in on who the demographic was, and specifically actually created it for myself. It started out just as a group, an unpaid group that I really needed people to talk to throughout the day. I needed people to hold me accountable to moving forward on my personal business development projects, which is what I help others do, but it's really difficult to see back on yourself. And I knew what I needed. So I created this group, and then as it kind of, we worked out the kinks and it started to grow, and we decided, hey, this is definitely, especially then, COVID happened and everyone went remote, and more of those things started popping up, and more people needed that kind of support that they might have been getting elsewhere
Mhm.
previously. So I turned it into an official group, and it's doing for me what my hope is that it'll do for others, which is create this community, allow us to move forward on our goals and have sort of colleagues without really having colleagues, so
Mhm.
that we can get feedback and support in our businesses.
Oh, that's so cool, and such a necessary thing and space to create. I know I've had so many conversations with other entrepreneurs about like the struggles, especially other like coaching kind of folks, about the struggles of selling like an intangible process,
Mm-hmm.
or like the struggles of, having somebody understand the transformation and the financial, necessity of, like paying for it and that kind of thing. Like, there's so many unique kind of challenges that it is awesome to create that space and sort of say like, hey, we don't have to recreate the wheel every time we come into a challenge, because maybe somebody else has been through this before and can say like, oh, I learned, XYZ. Yeah. So I want to shift a little bit to kind of some of the work that you do with clients, because I know, like I mentioned, I'm not always the most organized, strategic, structured person. And so I'm just curious, like, what kinds of things do you focus on with people, and like, what does that relationship even look like?
Of course. So I think the first point that brings clients in is that I'm also transparent that I'm not perfect. And I
Mhm.
think that some people are intimidated by, oh, well, you have everything figured out. Like I have absolutely nothing figured out. There's no way I can work with you because we're so far apart.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's really the case. We all struggle a little bit, even with the things that we teach others how to do. And we're all constantly learning and adjusting. So I start with like, hey, we're all human, we're all imperfect. Some people are better at certain things and other people are better at other things. So let's just work through the process. And what I've found, again, as I've gone through the years and adjusted the process, what I found to work best is I meet with a client once a week, ideally for a 3-month period to start, but it can be as long or as short as necessary. And usually they're coming to me because they have a big project, something specific that they've wanted to do and just have not been able to make time for.
Mhm.
So we use that sort of as the anchor to our collaboration. And then with that, we end up talking about a lot of the different areas of business, starting with, okay, well, let's first turn this really big thing into really small things and decide how we're going to get started, and maybe create some milestones and start moving forward. But just using the project as sort of the center of our collaboration means that we can use something tangible to work on the other things, like the productivity things, the time management, the habit formation,
Mhm.
because the reason that they haven't been able to move forward on the project is that they don't necessarily have all of the tools in place to get there. So using this kind of as our example, maybe one week we're breaking pieces down. They also use me as accountability because they know they're going to have to talk to me in a week. So they
Mhm.
decide, okay, here's the very small piece that I know I can get done this week, given everything else I have going on. We look at how they structure their day. We look at what their calendar looks like. We look at how many clients they might be having at one time, what their processes are, if they're duplicating work. We look at what their distractions might be.
Mhm.
So if they, for example, in one week they say, okay, I'm going to get to this thing, maybe we get to the next week call, maybe they haven't done it, we get to explore, okay, so it was scheduled on your calendar to do Tuesday at 9 a.m. Let's talk about why that didn't happen. Oh, well,
Mhm.
I realized that on Tuesdays my kid has this thing that keeps
Mm.
happening, so we have to work around what their realities are. We have to figure out, sometimes they have limiting beliefs that we might have to work through. There's so many different things that pop up for different people, but because we're using this concrete example and we're trying to move forward on something very specific, then
Mhm.
we can in real time figure out what some of their barriers and blocks are, what the strategies are that we want to put in place, and then continue to move forward one step at a time.
Wow. That's incredible to like hold that space for people too. Cause like I imagine, I think as an entrepreneur, sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to, I don't need to hire someone for that. Like I know I just need to get organized. I'll do it. But it sounds like, you're really providing that like, okay, cool. I'm giving you an hour to dedicate to like having a conversation about this. And I want to ask because I know sometimes, and you hinted at this a little bit, but I know sometimes as coaches who really are in the situation, we see some of the deeper issues. And I know for myself that analysis paralysis and just adding more things was definitely a coping mechanism for me. But I'm just curious, like, what do you see as like what might be behind our like disorganization, like what might be under the surface that we can watch out for?
Yeah. So I'm going to sort of peel it back a little bit at a time. So
Hmm.
first we find distractions. We find, for example, I mean, we're all sort of, we all could be a bit better about our phones or checking our email. So there are certain things that are simply designed to distract us and to pull us away, that as humans, like we've sort of fallen into that. So that's kind of surface level.
Hmm.
Maybe going down another layer, there's people have overscheduled themselves. So if they have 10 calls today, that's not really realistic, but say there's 10, there's
Mhm.
absolutely no time between them, then they're like the thing that they used for call one, then it's piled under call two's paperwork, and then it's piled under call three's paperwork. So by the end of the day, they've got 10 calls piled up, and then they're like totally exhausted by the end of the day. And the next day they're like, oh, now I have 10 more calls and I can't deal with a pile. So first, maybe we're overscheduling and not creating that space to organize the thing before we move on to the next thing. But then that brings us a layer deeper where we maybe don't have systems to help us organize those things. And so we get this pile of stuff and we're not really sure what to do with it. And we'll take care of it later, but later turns into this big pile that's kind of unmanageable.
Mhm.
And then a layer deeper, we took on 10 calls because we have trouble saying no. And we have trouble saying no because we have a fear of missing out of whatever that thing is. So it kind of always comes back down to fear of something, fear of missing out, fear of missing income, fear of missing opportunities. And sometimes we do get to beliefs or really deeply rooted things that I'm not necessarily qualified to help them work through. So it's
Mhm.
good that we've identified them and there are strategies that we can try to use to help eliminate them or to help move them into a calmer place, a more organized place, a more systematized place. And
Mhm.
then they can decide based on whatever they learn if this is something that they want to work with a professional that deals with that space.
Mhm.
So there are certain things that I can do on the organizing and productivity side. There are
Mhm.
certain things they can do to explore their totally underlying beliefs, and then there are certain other professionals that they can go to depending on
Mhm.
what they sort of discover along the way.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you're so right. Like, I know, like, the overscheduling really speaks to me in terms of like, oh, I have to, like, I want to work with everyone. I want to help everyone. I want to, like, make all this money. I want all these things. And so, yeah, that, like, wow. Yeah. How often do we take a bunch of calls and then leave no time for implementation and no time to make anything happen? So yeah, hearing that, you have to give yourself that time. You have to, leave yourself some time after call one to organize what you're doing with call one. That's super helpful. So I'm curious, like, what are some of your favorite tools for staying organized? Like, if I'm looking at, the situation I just had call one, like, am I adding to do list? What am I doing with, kind of my tasks?
Mm-hmm. So I've tried a little bit of everything, and
Hmm.
I think that that's helpful because then I can either suggest specific tools or I can say, hey, here's what worked for me, here's what didn't.
Hmm.
And to be very honest, I actually prefer the simplest tools that are available. I've tried Asana and different digital task management tools. I've
Hmm.
tried paper notebooks. I've tried bound notebooks. I've spent all sorts of money on planners,
Hmm.
and they work for a little while. But honestly, the best ones that have worked for me are just consistency in the system. And
Hmm.
so my favorite tools are Google Calendar.
Hmm.
And I use that for basically all of my time related appointments or very time specific tasks.
Hmm.
I use it I connect it with Acuity to help with scheduling clients. And so that kind of helps me if somebody's trying to overschedule. The tool is kind of already in place. I've told the tool what my boundaries are, and then the tool
Hmm.
can kind of tell the people. So it's a little less
Hmm.
flexible than them talking directly to me and me kind of saying yes to things I don't really want to do. Um, Not that I don't want to do them, but if my best peak hours for myself
Hmm.
are between 8 and 10, I tell Acuity, okay, I'm not available between 8 and 10, and then somebody will schedule a different time. So it's kind of a win-win. Um, so yeah, the calendar plus Acuity for scheduling,
Hmm.
and then time blocking. So again, just back to the calendar, putting task reminders on the calendar,
Hmm.
um, and then just a plain old notebook. So I've literally tried everything, and I just keep coming back to these.
Hmm.
And the key is having a system and then sticking to it,
Hmm.
honestly. So
Oh,
anything
yes.
can
Love
work, but just make sure that you stick to it.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that I have fallen prey to shiny software syndrome a number of times where I'm like, oh, I want to use Trello. I just heard good things about Asana. Monday is really great at targeting me with ads. Like,
Yep.
I'll eventually figure it out when I have the perfect software.
Hmm.
But it sounds like, it's really that process of figuring out what it is for you and then just being consistent with that thing.
Right. And just a note on software, I think they're really great for managing teams across
Mm,
borders. So if you're working with a team on a project and you're not together in person, I think tools like Monday and Asana and Trello are fantastic, and they're really great for knowing who's where, what they've done.
mhm,
I love those tools for team projects, but I've tried them for just myself. And
mhm,
the tendency that I have is that it gets, because digital space is unlimited, it gets stock full of tasks that I forget and ignore and never look at. And then all of a
mhm.
sudden there's a million things or 100 things due on one day, and you're just like, forget it. And then you stop
Yeah,
using it.
for
So I
sure.
think these other systems or slightly simpler systems require you to be a little more realistic with how many things you can do in a day. And they're also harder to ignore if something came due and you have decided not to do it. So deciding if you actually should be doing it and maybe eliminating it or delegating it or moving it to a more appropriate time. Whereas these digital tools is just kind of an endless list of stuff, and I find that it's kind of hard to manage that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I know sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do all this thing, and then I have like 38 items on my to-do list,
Exactly.
and like I don't know, then I like beat myself up for not hitting them, but then I know I had to like prioritize, something else that came up. So love that advice. And I'm curious too, because as entrepreneurs, we kind of get to dictate what our day looks like a bit. And so, if I'm on a mission to have like a really powerful work day, um, I'm just wondering, like, you're a person who focuses on productivity a lot and like spends a lot of time thinking about these kinds of things. So I'm just so curious, like, what does your day to day look like?
First of all, I think you would really love. Have you heard of Daily Rituals by Mason Curry?
No.
It's one of my favorite books. I think you'll
Okay.
love it. It's
Cool.
about different professionals throughout history and what their daily routines were, and they're
Ooh,
all a
I
little
am.
bit different, but everybody had their thing, and it's great. So try that.
Mhm,
Um, for me, I'm also, sort of full disclosure, I'm not perfect, and I may have really productive days and sort of
mhm,
imperfect days. But in general, I'm really starting to find my groove, and I think the key is once you discover what works for you, again, sticking to it.
mhm,
Um, so the first thing that is really helpful for me to do in the day is to read. Have you ever heard of scripts?
no.
So I recently read Earth is Hiring by Peta Kelly,
Mhm,
and some people call them affirmations. She calls them scripts.
mhm,
So I created a daily script. It's just about a page long,
mhm,
where you're basically telling yourself kind of who you are, what you do, how you feel in the present tense. And
mhm,
so I talk about focus in this script. So if I read that at the beginning of the day, it's kind of like a meditation too, or like your power up conversation, which is really helpful. You kind of just start the day with the right foot forward, with the right intention. And
mhm,
it's similar to if you accidentally squeeze toothpaste all over your shirt in the beginning of the day, the rest of the day sort of goes downhill. So if
mhm,
you set a really good and powerful intention at the beginning of the day, you kind of
mhm,
are, in setting that intention to the universe that it's going to go in a positive way. So I
mhm,
start the day that way. And then the first 2 hours of my day, I try to block off completely to other people, appointments. Like that really needs to be my business development time or my writing time. Kind of the working and focusing on me time. I'm the most productive at that during those hours. I've discovered that, and anytime I've ignored that, I realize like, oh, I put some kind of appointment at the beginning of the day, and now the rest of the day is shot. So I really
mhm,
have to try to stick to that, stick to my guns, say no to other opportunities that might happen during that time
mhm,
so I can focus on myself and my other,
mhm,
I guess they call them gain tasks, where it kind of
mhm,
moves you forward.
mhm,
Then the around noon or one, I take a walk outside with my dog and my husband, which is really great. It's refreshing. We kind of, right now, we're both working from home. So it gives us the opportunity. We don't have colleagues to kind of like
mhm,
debrief with. So we can kind of do
mhm,
that together and get the fresh air. And then
mhm,
when I come back, the second half of my day is normally for these types of calls, scheduling appointments, kind of giving myself to my clients and being a bit more social, because the hard work part is kind of depleted. So I need to do more of the social stuff. And
Mhm.
then my dog kind of starts bothering me around 4:30 or 5. She's like, all right, I've been sleeping all day. Let's like go do
Mhm.
things, feed
I'm
me.
ready.
Time to go for a walk. So
Mhm.
I'll take her for another walk, feed her, and kind of honestly, my work day is over by then.
Mhm.
I just find that I'm not productive in the evening. No matter what I do, I cannot force
Mhm.
myself to do good work in the evening. So there's no
Mhm.
point in doing poor work and then kind of
Mhm.
submitting something that you don't feel good about.
Right.
So I
Wow.
may, some evenings are for fun, or some evenings are for reading, or, that kind of rotates. Another
Mhm.
thing that I really am trying to get better at is not reading email until 10 or 11 at the earliest, because as soon as you go into that inbox,
Mhm.
everybody else's problems suddenly become your
Right.
problems, and everybody's fires become your task list. And I'm just really bad at that. So if I don't check it at all, I'm way better off. I have a much better morning, a much better mindset.
Mhm.
Whereas even if I just check it for a second and I see all the things that came in, all of a sudden my brain is in a different place and I can't do that first 2 hours
Mhm.
for myself. So that's one thing that I'm improving on and really trying to get better at.
Mhm.
But that's sort of normally what a perfect productive day would look like for me.
Yeah. That's I have to say, like, I'm a self-leadership person, and like that is a tremendous, like a beautiful testament of self-leadership, and like showing up for yourself first thing, like with these affirmations and script for what you're doing, and then acknowledging like I need this time to myself. Like I can't give this to other people. I will show up for them later. That's really cool. And I love that you've kind of, intentionally structured your day in alignment with what you want to do, because that's really what it's about. Like you're realizing like my brain is wonderful at writing and like processing and thinking and doing all of these things here. I'll put my social things there. Amazing approach to it. So the one of the last things I want to touch on here, and when this episode is out, there will also be a blog accompanying it. This phenomenal blog that you just wrote for the Poppy Lead community, basically diving into reasons that you're unmotivated and how to get around them, which I totally get bit by the unmotivated bug from time to time. And I'm like, there's new episodes of Great British Baking Show. Of course, I'm not going to work today. So I'm just curious, like, obviously everyone go check out the blog, go read the blog for the full scoop, but could you maybe give us like a sneak preview of maybe one of the ways that we might be unmotivated and how to get around it?
Sure. Actually, it's not the first one on the list, but I think a really powerful one. And even I've just been seeing over and over in articles and in the media. I think there's a shift in perception. So it's my understanding, and I'm not in psychology, so I can't speak from that angle. But a lot of people think that they need to be motivated before they take action. Oh, I need to feel inspired to do this thing. And I think that the new culture, new articles are being written about how actually action inspires motivation.
Mm,
And it can be the smallest thing that if you start, and it's also around the law of inertia, whatever is in at rest will stay at rest, and whatever is in motion will stay in motion. That's obviously not a direct quote, but that you
mhm,
get the point.
mhm,
And so James Clear from Atomic Habits, um, No Excuses, Brian Tracy. I wanted to mention those as really good resources for people, and they tie in some of the other factors from the blog post.
mhm,
But really, if there's anything, one tiny thing that you can do just to get you moving, even if it has nothing to do with the thing that you actually want to be motivated to do,
mm,
once you get started, you realize like, wow, it's getting started that's the hardest part. But
mhm,
if you can kind of trick yourself either with habits, and Kelly Hope probably has a lot to say about that,
mhm,
or just with like, okay, I'm going to set a minimum of working on this for 30 seconds. I'm sorry, maximum. All I have to do is work on this for 30 seconds. Once the
mhm,
30 seconds is up, you're like, oh, well, I'm already in it, and maybe I'll just keep going. So,
mhm. I might as well
um,
finish the sentence.
exactly. And it just, once you get moving, it's just so much easier.
Yeah,
So I think
that's
that would be
beautiful.
the one that I would just want to share initially. That of course it's hard, and there may be other factors if you're um, perpetually unmotivated. Like there may be depression is a real thing, and I would want to encourage people to seek out help if that is potentially the cause. But there may be other things,
Mhm.
if that's not the cause, that can help you kind of push through that.
Yeah. Oh, that's such good advice. Cause yeah, I'm definitely one of those people where I'm like, oh, I need to get struck by the perfect words before I sit down to write. But sometimes just diving in, I've had to develop that skill for myself. And I think of it as like discipline, as like, okay, I'm committed to taking this action because I'm committed to these goals. And I know that if I can just get started, I can, maintain that momentum to keep going.
And if you can
That's
get started with
amazing.
small things
Yeah.
like, okay, I just need to write, 10 words, but then you start writing and it just starts flowing. And maybe the first 50 words are crap. And then you continue going and you're like, oh, wait, great. Here's my
Here's the
article.
good stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, we got it going.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, well, I have, loved hearing all of this amazing advice, and I'm definitely like thinking about the organization within my own business. So if folks listening are also, feeling this, how do we stay connected to you and what you're doing in the world?
Absolutely. I am predominantly on Instagram as far as social media, and my handle is at LK Consultants.
Mhm.
Um, Although, admittedly, I'm not very good at social media, so I'm also available at my website, lanakitcher.com.
Mhm.
And you can shoot me an email if you want to join my email list and get different tips or check out my blog. Any of those areas would be great.
Cool. Amazing. Awesome. Well, this has been an amazing episode full of actionable takeaways for people and, all sorts of things to think about in this realm of getting organized and what's at the root of my disorganization and what is just distracting me? Am I overscheduling? All of that. But before we part ways, I want to just ask, is there anything else that you want to share with listeners?
I think that, we're all figuring it all out. Nobody is perfect, not even the people who are teaching you how to do the thing. So just give yourself a little bit of grace and put a little trust in your abilities as an entrepreneur. And, things will work out. Ask for help, find your community. Just know that you may feel alone, maybe in your business or in moments, but we're all in it together in the entrepreneurial community and as fellow business owners, and we're all here to help you out in whatever way we can. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs trying to start out hesitate to ask for help or hesitate to reach out thinking like, oh, I'm supposed to know this, or oh, I'm supposed to figure this out all on my own.
Mhm.
um, but I don't think that that's necessarily the easiest or most effective way to move forward.
Mhm.
And we all, at least as far as I found, are really willing to help each other. That's how I met you, is that I had this vulnerable moment in a call and you said, hey, reach out to me. And we became friends after that. So I appreciate
Mhm.
you and what you stand for and what you're helping people do. And
Yay.
that would be my last thought.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, I love that spirit of collaboration. And I've talked before about how, like, that is the defining factor that has changed this kind of my second foray into entrepreneurship. Because the first time I was definitely in that mindset of like, oh, if I don't know this all on my own, if I don't figure it out by myself, then I'm not doing it right. And like, I can't ask for help or I'll be weak, and like all of the nonsense things that we say to ourselves. And so, yes, I love that message of community. And so, yes, everyone, Lana has great tips on the website and the bird by bird community, spreading its wings to the world. So be sure to check out everything that Lana is offering. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. If you are catching this on YouTube or Spotify or Google or Apple or wherever you're joining us from, be sure to like and subscribe, leave us a review or a comment. I always love hearing takeaways from the episode and what you thought. So be sure to leave that, and we will catch you next time.